The email arrived at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Subject: Urgent. Evidence of corruption network. They know you're watching. I'm Maria Santos, investigative journalist for La Verdad in Mexico City. I've spent the last 6 months tracking a corruption network that reaches from local police to federal officials, and now it's reaching into the supernatural. The email was from an anonymous source calling themselves El Vigilante. It contained documents that made my blood run cold: bank transfers, encrypted communications, and photos of meetings between politicians and figures I didn't recognize. But one detail stood out. Every meeting was scheduled for Thursday nights at 11:47 p.m. I'd seen this pattern before. In my research, I'd found that major corruption operations often had strange timing patterns. But this was different. The photos showed the same faces at meetings spanning decades, yet they hadn't aged a day. My editor, Carlos Mendez, had warned me about this case. "Maria, some stories are better left untold," he'd said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. "This one, it's not just about money. It's about something older." I didn't listen. I never do. The first break came when I tracked down one of the meeting locations, an abandoned church in the historic center of Mexico City. Built in the 16th century, it had been closed for decades due to structural instability. But the photos showed it in perfect condition, with lights burning in windows that should have been boarded up. I went there on a Thursday night, camera in hand, ready to document whatever I found. What I discovered would change everything I thought I knew about corruption, power, and the price of truth. The church wasn't abandoned. It was alive. The church doors opened before I could touch them. Inside, the air was thick with incense and something else, a metallic scent that made my teeth ache. The walls were covered in symbols I didn't recognize, carved into stone that looked centuries old, yet somehow fresh. I heard voices from the basement, Spanish, but with an accent that predated modern Mexico. I crept down the stairs, my camera ready, and found myself witnessing something impossible. 12 figures sat around a stone table, their faces hidden by hoods. But I recognized some of them from my research: Senator Eduardo Vasquez, Police Chief Roberto Silva, and 3 others I'd been investigating. They were speaking in a language that sounded like Spanish but wasn't, their voices echoing with a resonance that made the walls vibrate. In the center of the table lay a ledger, bound in what looked like human skin. As I watched, one of the figures, Vasquez, signed it with a pen that dripped black ink that moved on its own, forming words in the air before settling onto the page. The corruption wasn't just about money, it was about souls. I snapped a photo, and the flash seemed to freeze time. All 12 figures turned toward me simultaneously, their eyes glowing with an inner light that wasn't human. Vasquez smiled, and I saw teeth that were too sharp, too many. "Maria Santos," he said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "We've been expecting you. Welcome to the real Mexico." The walls began to bleed. I ran, but the church had changed. The exit I'd used was gone, replaced by a corridor that stretched into darkness. Behind me, I heard footsteps that didn't sound human, too many feet, moving in perfect synchronization. My phone buzzed with a text from Carlos. "Maria, get out of there." They're not human. They haven't been human for decades. How did he know? I'd told no one where I was going. The corridor led to a room filled with filing cabinets that stretched to the ceiling. Each drawer was labeled with names: politicians, journalists, activists who had disappeared over the years. I opened one marked Santos Maria and found my own file, complete with photos of me sleeping, working, living my life. But the photos were wrong. In each one, my reflection showed someone else. A woman with my face but different eyes that glowed with the same inner light I'd seen in Vasquez. The file contained a contract, already signed in my handwriting. The terms were simple. My soul in exchange for the truth about the corruption network. But I'd never signed anything. "Maria," a voice whispered from behind me. I turned to see Carlos standing there, but his eyes were wrong, black pools that reflected nothing. "You've been part of this longer than you know. Your investigation was never about exposing them. It was about recruiting you." The filing cabinets began to open on their own, and I heard the sound of thousands of voices crying out in languages that predated human civilization. Carlos, or what was wearing Carlos's face, led me to a chamber beneath the church. The walls were covered in hieroglyphs that moved and shifted, telling a story of corruption that began before the Spanish conquest. The network isn't just in Mexico, the thing that looked like Carlos explained. It's worldwide. Every major corruption scandal, every political assassination, every economic collapse, they're all connected. We've been running the world for centuries, using human greed as our gateway. The chamber was filled with screens showing live feeds from government buildings, corporate headquarters, and newsrooms around the world. I saw familiar faces, politicians, CEOs, journalists, all working for the same network, all bound by contracts signed in blood and soul. "But why me?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I'm just a journalist." "You're more than that," Vasquez said, appearing beside me. "You're a descendant of the original Guardians, the ones who tried to stop us when we first arrived. Your bloodline has been fighting us for generations. But now, with the right persuasion, you could join us instead." He showed me a photo of my grandmother, taken in 1968 during the student protests. She was standing in the same church, holding the same camera I now carried. The photo was dated the day before she disappeared. "Your grandmother chose to die rather than join us," Vasquez continued. "But you're different. You've already signed the contract. You just don't remember doing it." The screens around us began to show my life, every moment, every decision, every person I'd ever loved. And I saw the truth. I'd been working for them all along. My investigation a carefully orchestrated recruitment process. "But I can still choose," I said, pulling out my camera. "I can still expose you." Vasquez laughed, and the sound made the walls crack. "Expose us to whom? The people who are already ours? The media we control? The government we own?" The camera in my hands began to heat up, and I realized it was never just a camera. It was a tool, a weapon, a key to something much larger than I'd ever imagined. The camera's lens began to glow, and I understood. It wasn't just documenting corruption, it was documenting souls. Every photo I'd ever taken had captured more than images. It had captured the essence of the people in them, storing their souls for the network's use. My grandmother hadn't just been a journalist. She'd been a guardian, using the camera to fight the network. But she'd been captured, her soul bound to the device, which had been passed down through my family, waiting for the right moment to be activated. "Now you understand," Vasquez said. "The camera chooses its bearer. It chose you because you have the power to end us, or join us. The choice is yours, but choose quickly. The ritual begins at midnight, and you're the final piece." I looked at the camera, feeling my grandmother's presence within it. She'd died fighting these creatures, and now I had the chance to finish what she'd started. But the network was vast, powerful, and already controlled most of the world. Could one journalist with a magical camera really make a difference? The answer came from the camera itself. The lens cleared, and I saw a vision of the future. A world where the network's corruption had spread to every corner of the globe, where truth was dead and lies ruled everything. But I also saw another possibility, a world where the network was exposed, where the truth set people free, where corruption was finally defeated. The choice was mine. But as I raised the camera and pointed it at Vasquez, I realized there was no choice at all. The flash was blinding, and when it cleared, Vasquez was gone. But so was the church, the network, and everything I'd thought I knew about the world. I found myself standing in the middle of Mexico City, holding a camera that was now just a camera. The corruption network was gone, but so was the evidence of its existence. No one would believe what had happened. But I knew the truth. And sometimes, that's enough. The camera's final photo showed my grandmother, young and alive, smiling at me from beyond the grave. She'd won. We'd won. But as I walked away, I heard a voice whisper in my ear, "The network is patient, Maria. We'll be back, and next time, you won't have a choice." I turned around, but there was no one there. Just the empty street, the setting sun, and the weight of knowledge that would haunt me for the rest of my days. The corruption was gone, but the corruption files remained. And somewhere, in the shadows between truth and lies, the network was waiting.